The designated survivor is used for events where the whole of the federal government is going to be together, like a State of the Union or a presidential inauguration. The administration, or in the case of the inauguration, the outgoing administration will literally pick a guy or gal, the Secretary of State or the Secretary of Agriculture, or whoever, in line of succession to the presidency, and send them to an undisclosed location so they're ready to take over in case something tragic happens. So we still have a president to look to. And they're sent to an undisclosed location. An undisclosed location doesn't mean anything particularly fancy. An undisclosed location could be, I believe, post 9/11, if I'm remembering correctly, they moved Cheney to an undisclosed location, and a couple times, and he said in later interviews, some years on, that the undisclosed location was his kitchen in the vice presidential residence at Observatory Circle. So just, you don't know where they are. In cases like these, like I said, the entire American government is usually in one location, and someone has to be ready to take over in case the worst happens. There has to be continuity of government. I would certainly watch these elaborate quite well upon the point that I'm trying to make. So the President is Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States. The President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy. Didn't have an Air Force back then, certainly didn't have a Space Force, of the United States and of the militia of the several states, National Guard. When called into the actual service of the United States, the President has the option to federalize the National Guard of any state or states of his choosing if he deems it necessary. So when does this happen and when is it legal? When can the President act as Commander-in-Chief? These are all valid questions that people struggle with. The President is always the Commander-in-Chief. That's just in the job title. It's debatable when he can use his Commander-in-Chief powers. And that really depends upon who you ask. Some will tell you only when war is declared by Congress. As you can see, the last time war was officially declared by Congress, who has that power, not the President, not the Supreme Court, but Congress, was on June 4th, 1942, against Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania, who had joined the Axis in league with Nazi Germany. So early Americans really didn't want to give the political class many powers in wartime because they saw the failure of a weak executive under the Articles of Confederation. They needed a single leader. There were, under the Articles of Confederation, too many chiefs, as it were. There needed to be one man executing a war or a conflict or whatever you want to call it. The framers did not want the President, though, to be unchecked, free to do as he pleases, so they granted powers to Congress, namely declaring war, saying we're in a state of conflict against so-and-so. They gave Congress the ability to control military resources, namely, the purse strings. Congress can fund or choose not to fund a military conflict. Congress can check the executive. The purse strings are the major power that Congress has. They can refuse to pay for weapons. They can refuse to, although none of them would get reelected, they could refuse to bring troops home. They could refuse to fund the sending of troops. The declaration of war also can be done in any way Congress deems fit. They can declare war but forbid the Army from using weapon X or bomb Y or airplane type Z. They're in control entirely. And then the president, if the system is working how it should be working, has to work within those parameters. So the purse strings, they're a very strong check on executive branch overreach, because it still has to be Congress that's footing the bill. So Congress, in this debate on the president's commander-in-chief powers, it says that the declare war clause, Congress has the power to declare war, and mark and reprisal clause, and this was before we had a Navy, Congress had the power to grant letters of marque and reprisal to ships, any ship really that was capable of carrying a cannon or two, and would give them license to go hunt, say, Spanish ships, if we were in a conflict with Spain, or Dutch ships, and would give them power to fire on them. It was legalized piracy, really, was what it was. But these two clauses granted Congress broad power over wartime activities. And people who take the side of congressional power in this debate say that the president has no authority to initiate hostilities without prior approval from Congress. Now, on the other side, the president says that Congress only has power over funding and the removal of executive officers, and since the president is vested with all executive power, and commander-in-chief is pretty much in the job title, the president, can insert the military into any hostile situation he deems fit. So there's a distinction here that both sides can agree on between Congress's power to declare war and the president's ability to repel invasions of military force. If the Canadians were for some reason to invade Maine and start taking it over, nobody at all would say anything if President Trump was to send the National Guard, the Army, the Coast Guard, whoever, up to Maine to push the Canadians back onto their side of the border. The president is supposed to do that. He is supposed to protect the homeland. Now, if the president said, we're invading Canada, that's a different story altogether. But nobody would bat an eye if he was to repel invaders. That's part of the job.